Hello, Westminster. My name is Boyd Taylor, and I'm here to talk about the fall edition of the Westminster Writers Journal and visit with one of our contributors. The Writers Journal is a, excuse me, is a platform for creative expression, whether poetry, memoir, nonfiction, or fiction, by Westminster residents. And copies of the spring edition of the journal are still available in the little store. If you didn't pick yours up, there's time to do that. But the fall edition, with 45 resident contributors, will be arriving in mid-November, we hope, Amazon willing. My guest today is one of those writers and a member of the journal's editorial board, Carole Sikes. Carole and her husband Charles moved to Westminster when the extension between the Preston and Windsor buildings was completed. I think that was in 2013. Hello, Carole. How are you today?
We didn't get here until 2016, boy.
Okay. So you're latecomers.
Yeah, right.
It just seems like you've been here a long time. You've been so active. So how are you and Charles getting along in these strange times?
Well, I'm experiencing some, I will lament a little bit. I'm experiencing some eagerness for this to get behind us, but I'm sure we all are. And we're certainly well taken care of. I can't complain at all about how they've cared for us here. So I feel very safe and secure. I'm just ready for it to be all over.
I think we all feel that way.
Exactly.
And I certainly agree that we have a great staff, and they've shown a lot of dedication and willingness to assist us in any way we need. So Kitty and I feel we're lucky to be here. You've been on the editorial board of the Writers Journal from the beginning. Describe how it feels to see this idea taken from that first meeting we had in the private dining room, and then trying to decide whether this thing had a chance of success. And now we're on our second edition with 45 contributors.
Well, it's very exciting, I think. And when we met that first time, I was amazed that there were so many people who were interested in it. I think what you did was you said this was the idea, and if you're interested in learning more and maybe joining us and helping, please come. And we just filled the little private dining room with people who were interested. So it's been very, very affirming, and I've enjoyed it very much. I really have.
Well, I have too, and I appreciate all your hard work. We have a dedicated editorial board. You, Lori Humphreys, Jeffrey Walker, Marilyn Woodall, Judy
Jim.
Iverson,
Jim.
And Jim, Jeffrey Walker. Yeah, and Jim Woodrick, of course. I don't want to leave him out because he's really done yeoman's work on this edition. And we have a very talented person working on preparing our covers and our layout, and that's Nancy Simons. I'm going to show the fall edition cover here if I can. There we go. As you can, it's a digitally enhanced photograph of one of Westminster's gardens. So I think it's really a nice looking book. Nancy does a very good job, and we appreciate what she does.
Nancy is a pro. She is a graphic artist, and she not only designed the cover, she also took the photographs, went out in the garden with her camera, and so she really, we're so fortunate to have her.
We were, and we are, and also she gave she gave the committee a choice of, I mean, some options in the colors that were going to be used, the tones that were going to be used and uh, we benefited from your experience as an artist to get a really handsome looking book. I might mention briefly how the journal is financed. Um, Westminster supported the publication of the spring edition, but that was a one-time arrangement, and so we're self-sustaining. And the money that we received from the sales of the spring edition were set aside by the Residents Association to print a fall edition. And so the success of the journal going forward depends on the sales of the current edition. And hopefully this edition will attract as much attention and support as the spring edition did. And we will have enough money to comfortably proceed with an edition next spring. We might talk a little bit about the decision that we made to include so many more writers in this edition than we did in the spring edition, Carole. There's
Well,
45 compared to 30 something.
right. Oh, it was I consider the first edition a great success. None of us really, we were making it up as we went along because, of course, it was the first time. And it was a wonderful idea that Boyd and Mike Roach had. And so we just sort of, had to lean on Boyd a good bit because he had used the woman who's helping us produce it, Danielle. I forget her last name, but so anyway, we had some expertise from Boyd, and we had some enthusiastic people, but I think there were only about 16 of us, but we had set a minimum, and we achieved that, a minimum number of pages. And this edition is larger, a little more costly to produce, and maybe $1 or so more than the last one to purchase. But I really am excited about this second one, and so thrilled because as we continue to produce them and sell them, then because we're self-sustaining, we can go on and on and on.
All it takes are some worker bees.
That's right.
And some writers. But I've been really pleased that we've attracted so much of the talent that is here. There's a lot of people here who have stories to tell, poems to write, things that they'd like to see published in a volume like this, and it's been rewarding for us to see how much interest it's attracted among the residents. And of course, we can't print a book if we don't have the manuscripts. So we've gone from 30 something to 45 this time, and I believe the plan is that the sales price won't be any more, so you'll be getting a real bargain when you get the bigger book. So let's turn now to you, Carole. You're a painter as well as a writer. In what ways are those artistic endeavors similar?
Well, of course, I have done writing always and enjoyed it, but I really am not a writer. I always hasten to tell people that, especially those who read what I write, who are writers. I consider myself a fairly creative person, and so because I no longer paint, I was an oil painter, and we're not able to use oils at Westminster, so I never used watercolors and really not interested in it. So I was kind of frustrated about what I could do because I like to have projects and try to be creative in different ways. And so I have leaned uh, on my writing. But all through school, I started graduate work at Columbia and in Teachers College. And so Columbia University Teachers College in New York. So there was lots of writing involved in that. And then I did complete my master's at the University of Texas. There was perhaps less because it was more, I was concerned with painting and printmaking
Mhm.
at the University of Texas and not so much teaching. But anyway, I've always written. And so I guess I'll call myself a writer if you're willing to do that.
Well, of course, you're a writer, but you're an artist. So the inspiration for a painting, uh, I s- what describe what that process is like. Do you visualize a scene? Do you see something you want to capture, or is how how does that work?
What I discovered, Boyd, and this is for me, not necessarily for all artists, but my paintings had much more energy if I began them in nature. In other words, I was interested in the landscape and I was interested in nature. Excuse me. And if I could, if I could take my portable easel outdoors and begin my painting out there, finish it in the studio, but it, whenever whenever I start in the studio, there's not nearly the nature, the energy that I have as when I'm before nature. So that was my start, and then I would uh, complete a painting in my studio at Lake Travis, where we lived
Yes.
before we moved here. And
And on the other hand, an inspiration for a story is it's different. Do you start with a character when you write fiction, or do you start with a story idea?
I think really it's pretty much the same in that it's for me anyway, it's a personal experience. In a painter, I like to be personally involved and see and be enthusiastic and excited about what I see. And then that's the same thing true, I think, when you write. But obviously, the difference is that it's it comes from the mind rather than actual visual experience,
It's
but an
it's
experience
the
nonetheless.
mind's eye
Exactly. Yeah,
rather than the eye itself. Yeah.
it's still an experience for me anyway. However, this one in the new that I'm going to read a little bit from in a minute. Uh, this actually came initially from a dream that I had. So there are all sorts of things that can uh, provoke a story. And but then at some point, and this is true with painting as well as writing, I think at some point the work has a mind of its own, and it leads you and you follow it.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk about that a little bit. Your story for this edition is entitled "A Boy and His Tent." You just say the inspiration for that story began with a dream?
It did.
Wow. Yeah. So would you read some of it for us?
I will. And I'm going to start at the beginning, which really was uh, what I had dreamed. And then I had to leave the scene, as dreams do, kind of all of a sudden you wake up or something happens and you quit the dream. And so then I had to ask, what about these characters? Who were they? And what were they doing? And what would they do next? And what was the purpose of what I saw or what was in the dream? So at some point, as I said, then the initial experience or the initial thing that uh, attracted you, be it a dream or something, a visual experience, you have to use your creative thinking and build on it. And that's kind of what happened here. And so with that, I will read the story and I will leave you. And I said the last time, I said, you may have, if you'd had this dream, you may have uh, done an entirely different, made an entirely different story. But here's mine. As Boyd said, it's called A Boy and His Tent. And again, I'm speaking in the male voice. Young woman and her child lost in a new town. She was attractive as could be, downright pretty if she fixed up a little. And the little tow-headed boy was adorable. He was about 5 or 7. I really couldn't tell. Seemed like she was homeless, and I guess I was too, almost. But I wasn't penniless. I had a little money in a bank account, and it sustained me till my house sold, and I could relocate somewhere here in Austin. I was watching them from my table in a breakfast diner. They would walk a little way up the street, and then they'd look around and they'd get to a bus stop, and they'd look down the street the other way, and then they'd go back and look again in the window of the Goodwill shop. She'd talk to her boy, and they'd walk some more in the opposite direction. And after this happened several more times, I paid my breakfast bill and went out to find out what was going on with them. She told me they's looking to buy a used tent. We knew we didn't have enough money, she said, but I just kept thinking we should see how much it is. My boy really wanted it. He saw it in the window, and it was foolish. It was foolish for us to keep going back, except I don't know where we'll sleep tonight. So we'd turn around and go back again. Her boy was the one who spotted the used tent in the Goodwill store. I could tell she was deciding if she might have enough money to buy it. So I said to her, well, let's go see about it. I guess I was so old that she wasn't thinking I was hitting on her. So we kept on, I kept on telling her that I wanted to help. And fact of the matter, she seemed real glad to find someone who wanted to help. She was pretty good at bargaining, but was still short of at the asking price. I watched her count her money over and over again. And as I watched the boy, worried and eager for his mom to come up with what the salesman said was his bottom price, she almost had the right amount, but I guess the salesman wasn't allowed to sell it below a certain price. He stood his ground, most likely figuring that I would come and help, and he was right. She was embarrassed to accept my $4.87, but she couldn't disappoint the boy. I took the little tent and folded it neatly in the bag and off we went to find her a job. She said, I'll pay you back just as soon as I get an advance in my job. You see, I was told by this guitar playing friend that he had someone in Austin that could help me out and help me find a way to this bar and maybe get a job. I have the address right here. Turns out she had run away from an abusive husband, and she planned to take a job in a bar here in Austin. She had a wrinkled up piece of paper with an address on it written by a guitar player's friend she had met in another town. He said that he knew his friend had a gig in Austin and would help her if she ever moved out here. Now, she was nervous about it because she didn't want anyone to be, she didn't want to be obliged to anyone in any way, but she wanted a job and she wanted to get it all by herself. But now she was desperate. So I knew the address on the paper and I told her I'd help her out and we'd find it. Well, that's where she met her disappointment. We walked into Frogs and found the owner, and he said, no, that bum could play, but I couldn't count on him showing up every night. And during the breaks, he'd drink until he could hardly stumble out at the end of 3 sets. I don't need him, and I don't know where he is. And besides, you don't want to find him, honey. But hey, let's hear you sing something, and maybe I can find someone who could use a singer. Well, that gal could really sing. I mean, really sing. I guess I was disappointed as she was. And when I saw her hugging her little boy with tears in her pretty green eyes, I was sucked in. Turns out this was a bar and a grill, and the owner says he really didn't need music and he sure couldn't use a singer, but he could give her a job cleaning up in the morning. She took it because she was really desperate, and we laughed. And I told her, now don't give up. We'll find you a singing job in one of these other bars along the street. There's no shortage of bars in Austin, and they all want entertainers. It'll take a little more time. Oh, was I wrong about that? Not about the bars wanting entertainers, but there's so many singers in this town. You had to know someone in the business to get a job. You couldn't just walk off the street looking rumpled and hungry and dragging a suitcase, especially with a kid and an old man coming along with you. At that time, my cell phone rang, and that's where I'll stop. So you'll hopefully be tweaked to find out what this unlikely pair found to do in Austin, Texas.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us, Carole. Your story has an interesting ending, which without disclosing it, did you know how the story was going to end when you started writing it?
No, what I have read to you is the extent, maybe with a little less than that, of what was in the dream. And so it was at that point that I had to say, all right, now what's happening to these two in Austin, Texas, with no opportunities, and what is she going to do? Will she find a singing job? And so that's when you start asking yourself about what the dream was the characters in the dream.
And do you find that characters tend to develop a life of their own and go ways that are unexpected to you when you start?
Exactly. I had no idea really when I started whether she'd be successful or not, and what would happen to the boy. And the title of the book, A Boy in His Tents, or Boy in His Tent, T-E-N-T, of course, was a very prominent thing about their finding a place to sleep. But
Yes.
But then I used that, the theme of the tent, and it reoccurred over and over and over again, in fact, to the very end of the story.
Well, I thank you. I recommend the story to all the Westminster residents. So when you buy your fall edition, turn to it and you will enjoy it, I assure you. So I think we're about out of time, Carole. Thank you for sharing that story with us, and now and for being here with me today. I appreciate it. And
my pleasure. My pleasure.
All of you watching out there, the Writers Journal Fall Edition will be in the here in a matter of weeks, and we'll keep you informed. And so this is Boyd Taylor saying thank you again to Carole Sikes, and thanks to all of you for watching, and stay safe. Let's see if I can wording, but I'm always surprised because there's a little something on each end. So, but I think we're done. I'll send you the link if you want to look at it.
Okay, good.
It'll be uploaded on YouTube, and
Okay.
it's where Ruth uses it to put it on 1890s. So I'll send it to you as soon as I can get it transcribed here.
Okay.
Unless there's a problem with the recording. Thank you, and thank Charles for letting us use his computer.
Yes, I will.
Yeah, okay, bye-bye.
Thanks so much.